Welcome to another Lunch and Learn with the Core Collaborative. This is part of our The Core Contribute series, and we're so glad to have you spending your time and attention with us. Today we have Paula Warren, an outstanding educator, and we're proud to have her as one of our partner consultants. She's going to be sharing with us not only the importance of lesson closure, but some very clear strategies that you can take and use tomorrow. So with that, I'll hand it over to Paula.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining in. So today I just want to take a few minutes of your time to talk about the importance of closing out your lesson properly. Whether your lesson is 15 minutes or a whole hour or maybe longer, it is important to give our students the opportunity to make meaning and connect relevant dots to that new information that we're providing for them. So some of our goals for today, we are definitely going to be understanding how lesson closure impacts our students' learning, but I also want you to walk away with a few strategies that you can implement tomorrow or later today when you're closing out your lessons. All right, so what do we know about closure? Well, we know that it takes a back seat to lesson openers. Many times we put a lot of focus and attention into the opening hook of our lesson. So that way students are interested, they're engaged, they're excited about what they're going to learn. But we tend to subconsciously sort of let that closure aspect kind of work itself out instead of really planning for it. And teachers want to close their lessons properly. It's not that they don't want to, it's just that many times we run out of time or we get sidetracked, whatever the case may be. So when we do give our students an opportunity for closure, we know that they have the ability to organize the information better, they can process it, they can critically evaluate, and they have the opportunity to store information that is within that mind's reach a little bit easier than without the closure of the lesson. We also know that when we don't close our lessons, and it's one of those situations where it's like, whoops, we're out of time. All right, we're wrapping up this and moving on to the next. These emergency landings don't really give our students that opportunity to make meaning and connections and to reflect on that new information that they just learned about. So without that feeling of wrapping things up nicely, they can feel a little bit perplexed. Why did I just learn this? How does it relate to other ideas or aspects or classes? They might feel a little bit frustrated because they don't know what they're supposed to do with this new information. Or they may even feel a little bit anxious. And I definitely think that those feelings are something that we want our students to be able to avoid. So when we do give students an opportunity for closure, we are definitely giving them that opportunity to attach context to deeper thinking, and that overall creates a much more rich and meaningful experience within our classrooms. So let's talk strategies. We know why closure is important, but what can you do tomorrow? One of the easiest and most common protocols that teachers tend to use are exit tickets. Now, one of the issues with an exit ticket is if you do run out of time and you're not able to finish up your lesson in the time allotted, you can do an exit ticket halfway through. You can use an exit ticket with whatever information those students actually already have. So even if you were supposed to get from point A to point B and you only made it to point A and a half in your lesson, that's okay. Don't go all the way up until the end talking about whatever new material is out there. Stop, give students a few minutes to process, and let them do an exit ticket that really is all about maybe mindset. So it's great to check for understanding of content and material, but you can also use this list to have them reflect on how what they learned is relevant for their life, for other classes. They can do a self-assessment. Where do they fall on a scale maybe as far as their level of understanding thus far? How are they feeling about what they've learned? What do you think one of their goals will be for tomorrow? These little sort of check-ins at the end of your lesson or at the end of the time allotted for that lesson can really be helpful. And sometimes teachers feel like they have to wait till the end of the lesson to do one of these check-ins. It's great to do halfway through. How are you feeling right now? And maybe choose one from the mindset or the relevance, self-assessment, check for understanding list to see where your students are at. With that being said, another option that you can do is you can always bring that opportunity for closure back to the learning target. So whatever your learning target is for that lesson, you can always have students reflect back on that target. For example, you might say, okay, guys and gals, ladies and gents, how did we end up, or how did we do with our target today? Did we meet our target? Did you come close to the target? Are we still far away from the target? You can have them even on a little scrap sheet of paper, jot that down, all right, with a little reason as to why they rated where they fell towards the learning target. You could have them say it to you as they walk out the door, something that has a little bit of accountability and really gets them thinking about where their learning is in relation to what the goal was for that lesson. Another great strategy that you can use to help close out your lessons is called punctuating your learning. So when you punctuate your learning, I love to do this with students like partners, okay, A partner and B partner. Partner A and partner B will both write down a mark of punctuation that represents their learning for the day. And some of them are a little worrisome, like a question mark. They still have questions. Maybe they're feeling a little bit confused. Some of them are amazing. They're quotation marks, right? They can explain this to somebody else. So partner A, partner B, they have their own little assessment. They write it down. They explain why they chose that question mark, and then they can share with somebody else. And in doing so, you get to listen to conversations. You're walking around, you're making a note of who is what punctuation mark. You can have them turn in sheets where they've circled their punctuation mark. And all the English teachers will absolutely love you for reinforcing some of these foundational ideas as well. So it's just another way to connect with something that they should be learning about anyways with these punctuation marks. Another idea is to make sure that you clean up before your lesson closure actually happens. So students tend to remember the last thing that you did for the lesson. That's what they're going to remember the most. So if you try to do closure and then you say, all right, we got 3 minutes, let's pick up our materials, put everything away, and it's kind of that organized chaos, that's going to be the last thing they remember. So when they walk in the next day, you say, okay, what did we do at the end of yesterday's lesson? We cleaned up our materials, right? So if you clean up first and then you wrap up, right? It's very helpful to switch that order. So maybe put all the materials away and supplies if you have a lot of things out, and then ask them to do a little reflection activity, a little exercise on thinking about where they fell towards the learning target. That then you walk out with a nice little plan for the next day and an assessment of where they're at. Another strategy that I absolutely love to use is a timer. I think it's okay to advertise the fact that we are using a timer. So during my lessons, if I have allotted 45 minutes for a specific lesson, I will tell my students, okay, class started at 9, at 9:40, we're going to start our closure part of the lesson. So I have literally set a timer before. I projected one on my screen. I've used a little egg timer before. I've designated a couple students to say, tell me when it's this particular time. And I think it's great that we can model time management skills as well, and that it's okay to use tools to help us with time management, because closure is so important that we don't want it to get lost in the shuffle, or the eagerness to learn, or the immersion in content. We want to make sure that we value and honor that student's time to reflect on what they actually have learned in that new material. All right, and then we talk about warming up. So just like I mentioned before, many times when we plan these lessons, we put a lot of thought into what our warm-up looks like, or our bell ringers, or our do nows, right? Whatever you want to call them. And so we have that warm-up to sort of get their brains going. And if we relate this to exercise class, all instructors do this as well. If you've ever taken a group exercise class, They spend the first 5 minutes just stretching, sort of warming up, get your body moving, get your blood flowing, get your muscles warmed up before you get into the really strenuous work. They also, in exercise classes, spend the last 5 minutes cooling down. They want to make sure you don't pass out when you walk out of the room. So you need to make sure that we're doing the same thing for our students, that we give them an opportunity to cool down their brains and sort of really focus on some of those connections that they can make where they're at in their learning and where they're going for the future. Sometimes even jotting down a plan for what they need to do the next day when they walk in or the next time when you meet them, that works as a great cool down exercise as well. And it's a lot easier to walk in and look at a plan from the last lesson, the last time you met, than it is to kind of look around and say, I don't remember what we did last time. So bringing it back to our learning targets, we do understand how important it is to close those lessons for students, and in order to give them the time that they need to reflect and process, we need to make sure that we have protocols in place, sort of our go-to, go-to activities or strategies that we can use for closure. And hopefully you'll be able to try out one or more of these strategies with your students to see which one fits best. And feel free to get some feedback from students as well as to how they feel about having that designated time for lesson closure. So your strategies that you're leaving here with today are some exit tickets. You may even want to go back and take a screenshot or take a picture of those exit ticket ideas. Feel free to use those. You can always bring it back to the learning target and ask your students where they fell in regards to the learning target. Where did their learning fall? You can ask them to punctuate their learning with specific punctuation marks and the meanings attached to those punctuation marks and explain why. And you can have them clean up before they do their closure activity or their closure thought exercise per se. And last but not least, you can definitely use a timer. So in summary, we know that lesson closure is very important to not only honor our students' time that they have to process new material and new concepts, but also to make connections, to make these ideas relevant. And in doing so, we set them up for a path of success. So that way they're not inundated with just new material and working right up until that bell rings. They have time to process, reflect, connect, which really enables some deep thinking to happen.
Thank you so much, Paula.
It's been wonderful, and it's exciting to get these really practical ideas that we can take straight back into our classrooms or back into our virtual learning. For all of those out there watching, rather, if you visit www.thecorecontributes.com, there are many more opportunities to learn with the Core Collaborative and our amazing network. We hope that you'll download the reflection journal that's provided, first so that you can capture your own reflections and have a record of your learning, but also because you will may qualify for CTLE credit and or college credit. Depending on your situation, you can reach out to us about that. And as always, we hope that you will keep connected with our network using each of these opportunities online to learn from us and our group. And please tag us when you share so we can learn from you. So in closing, thank you so much, Paula, for sitting down and sharing with us.
Thank you so much for having me.